On its last morning, Pompeii smelled of fresh bread. In the bakeries, loaves were already sliding into the ovens, the very same loaves we would dig out, burnt black, almost 2,000 years later. Shopkeepers unlocked their doors. Slaves drew water at the fountains. In a courtyard, a dog pulled at its chain. This was a busy Roman town of perhaps 15,000 souls going about an ordinary day. And by the following afternoon, that entire world would be gone, the city buried so deeply that history itself would forget it had ever stood here. This is the last day of Pompeii. To feel what was lost, you first have to see what Pompeii was. This was no ruin. It was a living, thriving city on the beautiful Bay of Naples, a resort where wealthy Romans came to enjoy themselves. It had a forum, temples and law courts, public baths, a great stone amphitheatre, bakeries, bars and brothels, the whole ordinary machinery of a Roman town. Bars with counters worn smooth by 1,000 hands. Villas glowing with walls of brilliant red and gold. Out on the streets, the election slogans were still freshly painted. Pompeii was not simply a town that died. It was an entire ordinary world, and it was about to be frozen at the exact instant it ended. Over that world rose a green and gentle mountain, Vesuvius. And here lies the first terrible irony. The people living beneath it did not know it was a volcano. Vesuvius had slept for centuries. Its slopes were combed with vineyards, its soil dark and generous. In their whole language of daily life, there was no word for what it was about to do. There had been warnings of a kind. 17 years earlier, a violent earthquake had cracked the city's walls, and smaller tremors still came and went. But to a Roman, an earthquake was only an earthquake. No one heard, in those tremors, the breathing of a giant about to wake. It was the year 79. Tradition places the day on the 24th of August, though newer evidence, autumn fruit and a date scratched in charcoal, hints it may have come that October instead. Either way, it began just after midday. The mountain tore open. Watching from across the bay, a young man, Pliny the Younger, saw a vast cloud climb into the sky. It rose, he wrote, like a great umbrella pine, a tall trunk of ash, blooming into branches at the top. It was the only shape he had to name it by. That cloud was a column of rock and gas, punched more than 30 kilometers into the air. And then it began to fall. The next 18 hours, Pompeii was buried alive. Not by lava, by an endless rain of hot pumice and ash, hissing down from a sky gone solid black. Picture that afternoon inside the walls. The daylight simply gone. Stones falling out of the darkness, hour after hour. The debris climbing the streets knee-deep, then waist-deep, then reaching toward the rooftops. It grew so heavy that roofs began to groan and then to give way, crushing those who had stayed inside to wait it out. Many did flee, clutching lamps and a few treasured things, stumbling blind through the black. But many others stayed, and the ones who stayed were being slowly sealed in. By dawn, parts of the city lay under more than 2 meters of stone, and the worst was still to come. In the first dark hours of the next morning, the eruption changed its nature. High above, the towering column collapsed, and the mountain sent something far deadlier down its slopes. A pyroclastic surge, a boiling avalanche of gas and ash, moving faster than any person could run, at temperatures near 300 degrees. The first surges tore into the seaside town of Herculaneum. Then they turned toward Pompeii. There was no outrunning this, and nowhere to hide. When the surge swept over the streets, the heat was so extreme that death came in seconds. The falling ash had buried Pompeii. This is what killed it. Across the bay, one man had sailed straight into the horror. Pliny the Elder, the young witness's uncle and commander of the Roman fleet, had ordered his ships out, partly to study the strange cloud, partly to rescue the people trapped along the shore. He reached the coast near a town called Stabiae, but the sea rose against him, the air thickened with fumes and falling ash, and he could not get back out. Pliny the Elder died there, on that beach, one of the very few victims of the day whose name we still know. His nephew's letters, written years afterward, remain the only eyewitness account of the disaster that has survived. When it was over, Pompeii was not damaged. It was erased. Buried under meters of ash and stone, the city dropped off the map, and in time out of memory itself. The survivors never came back to rebuild. The land smoothed over. Grass returned, then vineyards. For close to 1,700 years, farmers worked the soil above a perfectly preserved Roman city and never suspected it was there. Pompeii had not merely died. It had been sealed, locked in a tomb of ash so complete that the very thing which destroyed it was also the thing that saved it whole. Then in the 1700s, the digging began. And what came out of the ground was like nothing else on earth, because the ash had not only buried Pompeii, it had recorded it. Loaves still sat in the ovens. Wine jars still stood on the counters. Frescoes glowed on the walls, their colors barely dimmed. Graffiti still ran along the streets, insults, love notes, prices, names. This was no marble skeleton of a dead empire. It was a single ordinary day, 17 centuries old, kept exactly as it had been left. And then the excavators found something stranger and far more haunting, waiting in the ash itself. Here and there, deep in the hardened ash, there were hollow spaces, voids, in the exact shape of a human being. The bodies had long since decayed, but the ash had set hard around them first, holding each form like a mold. In 1863, an archaeologist named Giuseppe Fiorelli understood what they were. He poured liquid plaster into the empty spaces, let it harden, and cleared the ash away. And the last people of Pompeii came back, not as skeletons, as figures. A man shielding his face, a mother curved around her child, a dog still twisting against its chain, caught in the precise instant of death nearly 2,000 years ago. They're almost unbearable to look at, and almost impossible to look away from, because these are not statues that some artist designed. They are the true, final postures of real people in the last moments of their lives. Some sit strangely calm, as if they had made their peace. Some are frozen mid-crawl. Families lie together, hands still reaching for hands. Of the roughly 2,000 who died here in Pompeii, more than 1,000 have now been recovered. And across the whole region, perhaps 16,000 people may have lost their lives. The casts are not history kept at a safe distance. They are grief made solid and handed to us across 2,000 years. So why does Pompeii hold us out of all the cities that history has swallowed? Perhaps because it is not, in the end, a story about how people died. It is a story about how they lived, preserved so completely that we can still walk their streets, read their jokes, and stand before their faces. Every great city believes, somewhere quietly, that it will last forever. Pompeii believed it too on a warm morning with bread in the oven, and it had less than a day. It is the clearest proof we have that the ordinary world, ours included, is far more fragile than it feels. So here is the question. If your city had one last ordinary morning, what would it keep of you? Tell me in the comments, and I'll see you in the next fall.